Okay, I am ready to get started. I am first going to announce and introduce our speakers today. So we have Stephanie Cerullo. She's president of More Response Management Group in DC Metro. More RMG is a people-powered production environment that provides essential services to our clients' donor relationships. The DC Metro location was formerly known as Merkle Response Management Services, and Stephanie was brought on as president almost 2 years ago, shortly after the acquisition by More. With a deep background in database marketing, management, and data services from her prior roles at Merkle, Epsilon, and Data Axle, Stephanie's understanding of fundraising challenges motivates her commitment to value creation and gift processing. Stephanie describes running a response processing business as a behind-the-looking-glass experience, where direct mail fundraising results are manifested and donor data is created. Thank you for being here, Stephanie. And we will move over to George Whalen, president of More Emergent Division. George joined Emergent in 2021 and has been the president of More's Emergent Division for 3 years. He oversees the Emergent Division's account services and data services team, including the highly successful Portfolio CRM solution. Recent portfolio clients include the National Foundation for Cancer Research and the American Cancer Society. Prior to joining the More team, George had a stellar 10-year career at Blackbaud in the analytics division. His wide range of experience also includes 17 years of managing omni-channel direct response fundraising programs for national nonprofits. His diverse background includes a strong understanding of each level of the donor giving cycle, including mid-level, major donor, and planned giving, and of course, DAF giving. So welcome, George, and welcome, Stephanie. I'm excited for you to get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey. So, Joey, are we going to hold questions to the end, or the questions are going to go through?
Yes. So if you want to put your questions, I will review them. If one pops up about what you're talking about, we can read it if time allows, or we can do it at the end.
Okay, you can jump to the next slide. So here we are. You've heard the commentary already from Joey in our intros. I just want to point out that with the back up on Joey, we're going to have fun with this before we start. As a New Yorker in the Boston area, when we asked for a quote, I looked for a Yankee quote. Nobody can laugh here or smile or give a big thumbs up, but I wanted to point that out. And Stephanie's got a great quote as well from Special Olympics. So we're here to talk today about donor advised funds. And I wanted to start off with some background on this. Donor advised funds in the last 10, 15 years have been the fastest growing giving channel in the US. Contributions, I want to point out, are irrevocable. What makes donor advised funds so strong, and most importantly, the individuals that are identified who give through donor advised funds, in that these are individuals who are highly philanthropic. They're individuals who, once identified, are very loyal to an organization. Retention rates are through the roof. Donor giving is through the roofs, more likely to become long-term sustainers, more likely to become planned giving and major gift prospects. Most of the donors tend to fall in that mid-level, low major giving range. But certainly a donor that you want to have on your file, even if it creates a little bit of a difficulty in tracking that we'll talk about a little bit today. So how fast are they growing? Fidelity Charitable is the largest of all of the DAF grant providers in the industry, so I thought I'd use them as an example. Back about 10 years ago, there were 118,000, almost 119,000 donors in Fidelity that had a DAF account. That number has skyrocketed in 10 years to 322. You'll see the same here with the number of donor advised funds complete in total, which has gone from 72,000 to 197. There are in the US today over 2 million DAF accounts. And at the start of 2023, DAF donors controlled over $228 billion worth of funds for charitable giving. This is a big area that is continually growing, and hasn't showed much signs of slowing down. And actually, during these difficult years with some of the economic issues and economic uncertainty, DAFs have not been hit anywhere near. The performance has not dipped as much as other channels have. So who is giving using, Stephanie, you want to cover this one or do you want me to do it?
I'll jump in just because I
Okay.
like the way, I like that thought too about how it will be it could be a very stable group of donors because they in effect have already maximized the charitable deduction in opening a DAF account. So they have that established base of discretionary revenue to give. So that probably is a lot of what makes them so loyal and retain very well. And personally, I like the idea, just hearing you talk, of this for donors that are in that mid-level to low, quote unquote, low major giving tier for most of our clients, because so much of our industry and the giving industry is being concentrated in the hands of a few very, very wealthy these last few years, which so it kind of equals things out a little bit, or at least enables the everyday donor to feel like they have as much wherewithal to put their money in what's important to them, depending on events. So basically, as George said, in terms of the dollar amount of the donations that are being directed through DAFs, the people look like your major donors on your files. So what I'm showing you here is what a Simio Journey model has shown as how to find likely DAF donors in your file. Now, so that you can maybe recreate if you don't have the time or you don't feel like you have the volume to create a model using co-op data. The top 5 positive predictors tend to be RFM values, which you have in your database anyway. And then the next 5 to 10 of the positive predictors tend to then show up in the cooperative database variables. And I'll have sample examples of these from a model from last summer on the next slide. And just in talking with our strategist at Simio, Matt Frattura, the demographic predictors are not as common in the DAF propensity models as they are in major donor propensity models. And that, again, could be, and this is just a theory on my part, but the individuals who aren't necessarily working with a vast amount of discretionary funding, but really prioritize charitable giving. So the recent model came up with these top 7 positive predictors. And again, for those of you who haven't been using a cooperative model around this type of giving, typically it will be a clone model, which means you will send your existing DAF donors and the analytics team will look for like people across your entire file and be able to give you tiers of people from the most likely to give through a DAF to kind of generically likely based on a lot of the modeling attributes, which it's definitely a blunt cut if you try and do it on your own, but it is, I think one thing you'll see as George takes back the reins is that there are many levers to press in order to kind of increase the kind of giving you're getting through this vehicle. So what we have here is we have average donations per year to your organization. So they will give more than one time a year. The max amount of their gift in the past year to your organization. And then what pops here is the type of the total donations that come through the mail in the past 12 months to your organization. And then we get down a little lower on the list to the average donations per year to your mission sector within the co-op data. And then the average donation amount to all organizations in the past 2 years across the co-op data. And then just as a litmus test, those average donation amounts tend to be in the hundreds, 100, 200, 300. And then finally at the bottom is a variable that also tends to pop in major donor models, and that's the likelihood to have made an investment in the last 12 months. And that is a kind of a compiled data point that comes from sources outside of the co-op members' own data. So that's kind of, I guess the generic recipe, I would say, based on a recent model and just directional and supportive of what George has seen in his experience of DAF donors.
Excellent, Stephanie. And one thing, we can move to the next slide, Joey. One thing to point out when we go through best practices, the model is great for refining and identifying who exactly you should be communicating to and asking if they have a DAF or not, and asking them to use the DAF if they do have one. There's a lot of recommendations and a lot of best practices that can utilize the models, as well as just, being able to reach out to a larger universe based on, as Stephanie mentioned, traditional RFM and some of the other factors that can help you kind of fine tune who you should be talking to. So we're going to go over some of the recommendations here. I'm going to be floating between direct mail and digital back and forth. So if there's any questions, at all, please feel free to put it in the chat. But in regards to online, you definitely want to revise your giving pages to increase DAF visibility. And we're going to cover that in a couple of slides. You want to be able to promote DAF as an option. So you're still going to have, your donation ask string, click here to support, possible planned giving information, whatever you have, sustainer giving, whatever options you have in there. DAF is just another channel within there. You do want to be able to use, working with either an agency you work with or with someone that works around DAFs, you want to be able to identify who are the top charitable sponsors to your specific organization. And I'm going to show you that in the next slide, an example of what that looks like, and then include the links. So I can tell you right off the bat, Bank of America, Vanguard, Fidelity, those are going to be among the top ones for just about every nonprofit in the country. You want that link to be there once they click on it, having interest in a DAF and move to a DAF page. You want that link there because you want to make it as easy as possible for the individual to make that charitable donation, to make that grant if they have a DAF account. And obviously ease of use as much as possible. So this slide shows exactly what I'm talking about. This is an example of an organization out west. So you're going to see Silicon Valley as one of the foundations. But we basically look at the donors, the current DAF donors, and where those charitable funds came from. And we'll identify who are the top 5, 10, 15, depending on the organization that those gifts are coming from. And we basically have the links there on our donation, on one of the pages within the website. So in the case of this client, you've got Fidelity, you've got Schwab, Vanguard, National Philanthropic Trust, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Bank of America, and Morgan Stanley. You want to make it as easy as possible. If George Whalen, has a DAF account through Schwab, you want to make it easy for George to click on, I can donate to it. I can make a DAF donation, click, and then I have, there's my Schwab charitable fund. I can click on that. And then what I would recommend even above that is, if you can, I would put in your tax ID, EIN number, to make the process even easier. So when you're clicking on these pages, you're leaving your website, but you're going to Fidelity's page, you're going to Vanguard's page. If there's information there, and this is especially important with chapter organizations, Habitat for Humanity chapters, Salvation Army, things like that, especially important because if you want that donation to be going specifically to your organization, that tax ID is probably the easiest way to make sure it goes to the right place and doesn't go to, the territory or national or what have you. But certainly to have that incorporated into the page as well, because you want those donors, you want to make it as easy as possible for those donors to make donations and to make a grant specifically to your organization. So here's a couple of examples of an organization's page and how, we have adjusted it a bit. You'll see that there's a more ways to give section that includes DAF information, that when you click on it, you'll go to a more DAF focused focus on how to make the grant and more information around it and everything else if you're looking for it. And I would point out here, there are online and they're free widgets that can be used. So DAF Direct and Chariot are probably the two most common ones being used. I have DAF Direct here as a sample. Again, another way to make it easy for the donors. The DAF Direct widget and the Chariot widget basically provide information on, being able to quickly click onto a Fidelity site, a Vanguard site, depending on the organizations that organizations that you're getting grants from, just to make it easier to get it through. And I mentioned there, you see to include the EIN number to make sure you have the tax ID in there. But the point is, it's all about making it easier for the donor to be able to make the grant if they have one. So this is where we've talked about digital, how to make it easier on the website. You also want to be able to get those individuals through kind of just traditional outreach. So for example, you have the widget, you have the URL and the donation page. Are there banner ads that certain times of the year, like the fall, could have a DAF message attached to them? Can you find ways of click tracking on the DAF Direct widget to see how many users go off-site to complete it? You want to track the performance, and you want to be able to see. One thing that's very difficult about DAFs is tracking the performance. And Stephanie's going to talk about this a little bit later, but we want to make sure that we're able to at least soft credit back to the donor acknowledgement of the gift, so that we've got, not only are we acknowledging the donor's donation and through the grant, but we're also maintaining that kind of 360-degree view, that omni-channel view of the donor's total giving, which includes, obviously, as an important, vertical in there, important channel, the donor advised fund giving. Stephanie, I think this was you.
No,
I can jump on it. So in the direct mail part, think about promoting it everywhere you can at specific times of the year. Reply slip, reply backers, inserts in newsletters, special appeals. Make sure you use, as we've all seen, QR codes, are becoming big and used all the time. Personally, the usage of it, the click-through isn't always that strong, but it lifts response. In the case of DAFs, having that QR code that goes to the DAF widget or to the DAF giving pages, very important. Want to make sure that you have general messaging, because even if you're building a model, the model just identifies the individuals most likely to have a DAF account. Does not specifically, there's nothing out there that will say George Whalen has a DAF account unless he actually uses it or acknowledges and says that he has one. So they basically will identify most likely to have. So you want to use generic language, like if you have a donor advised fund account, you want that incorporated in there. You want to think about, again, donor interest. These are individuals who are mid-level usually to low major gift, the individuals who are most likely going to have a DAF when you're focusing on who you're going to be targeting, making sure the personalization is appropriate for those individuals. It's not an acquisition appeal, it's more targeted, and the languages be different. Indicate that you know where the donor sends gifts from. If you have a current donor that is a DAF donor, and let's say that you're in October and they have yet to use their DAF this year, it can be a solicitation, it can be a communication, it can just be a one-page letter that goes out that mentions and points out that that George Whalen, you have donated, you've made a grant through Fidelity in prior years. Are you considering making one this year along those lines? Anything to help kind of make that kind of personal connection and encourage that type of DAF giving at the end of the year. And again, obviously assist prior donors with live links to the sponsor org and so forth. Remind donors that DAF giving is open. Make sure that you are friendly to DAF. I can't tell you, 10, 15 years ago, when they start to pick up steam, there were a lot of organizations who did not intentionally incorporate DAF messaging, and some still don't, because it takes the donors outside of that giving, bubble within an organization. You're right. It's absolutely true. They're going to leave the donation page. They're going to go through a different channel, and you are going to kind of have that gray area where you lose track of them. But the type of donor that gives through DAF is so loyal to an organization, in so many cases, much more so than traditional donors, that you want to encourage donors to go down this path. You want to encourage donors to make those donor advised fund gifts and grants, and to maintain that communication, that contact with them.
George, we have a question in the Q&A. What is the best responding, quote, specific time of year?
We are going to cover that in a little bit. We have a chart up ahead that looks at calendar year 2023 and the organizations that Emergent worked with, 2022, I apologize, and the organization Emergent works with, and what that breakdown of giving was. So most giving, I will say right up front to answer the question, quickly, before we get into a more in-depth answer, most giving is around the fall season. I would say between September and January is when you see the majority of the giving coming in, but DAF giving can be year-round. I would, if you're a international relief organization, if you're an organization that has specific times of the year, a religious organization around Easter time, for example, if there are specific times of the year where there's other bumps, you want to incorporate the DAF message around those bumps. During tax time is also a bump there, because that's when, even though their giving is usually year-end focused, there are individuals who are thinking about their DAF and when they're going to grant or not grant donations. Tax time is a time where they're looking at every investment they've made. That's also a nice time to get that message out there. But we're going to cover that question a little bit later on in the presentation in more detail. Okay, DAF and year. Oh, the slide is here. What timing? I did not plant that question. So this is a look at 2022 Emergent clients. I'm going to point out that we encourage organizations to have a DAF message year-round. So these are not going to be the types of numbers that a lot of organizations would see. These are organizations that have been using best practices of having that DAF message throughout the year at certain times. But you'll see the April-May period. That is right around tax time. There is going to always be a delay, and Stephanie's going to talk about this from a caging perspective, because there is a strong push to having the different grant deliverers use EFT funds, but some of them still send out checks. And at the year end, if an individual makes a DAF grant on December 15th and is expecting that grant to get the check cut by a Fidelity, for example, to the nonprofit, processed and in by the end of the year, it may not happen. That's why you see December is 20%, but of the entire year, but January is also a bit of a bump there. And April tax time is an 8% bump, but there's another bump there in May for right after that, with whatever gifts have kind of flowed in. And Stephanie's going to talk about that more. But you'll see here, it's a pretty even time. I mean, similar to nonprofit fundraising for the most part. June, July, kind of a dead time. And then you've got the bump in the fall, of course, and that tax season as well.
Couldn't have been a better segue, so thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is just kind of what happens at any time of year when DAF gifts come in. And we do get a lot of checks that are from DAF accounts. And one of the really key organizational conversations is a consistency in the data capture. And honestly, it really is a partnership between your caging partner and your teams, because you might have different rules depending on the size of the gift that comes in or how it comes in. Many clients still get some directly to their home offices, and then some come to the PO box that perhaps a caging partner like Moore would manage. But these aren't, this is a real partnership. These aren't easy situations to needle through. And one of the reason is because you really have a lot of entities in this gift. So who is the donor in a donor advised fund? So technically, when you get the gift from any of those philanthropic partners that George listed, they are the donor, which is why they typically will get a hard credit in your database. However, that donation has been inspired by or requested by or otherwise motivated by the name of the person who opened the DAF account. So that is, and I say individual, but I mean the person that you're actually mailing your outbound communications to. It could be a household, could be a couple, whatever. But you know, that is another entity that is equally as important, if not more important, to capture that they have inspired this gift from a donor advised fund. So what George called the partner organizations, I just mentioned here is the third party funding organization, your Fidelities, your Schwabs, and actually I should say, and it's not just Fidelity per se, it's Fidelity Charitable or Schwab Charitable, or I think another one you listed was National Philanthropic Trust, or something like that, or it can even be a community foundation, or some other previously established charitable fund of their organization of their own. And then sometimes the donor advised fund has a family name on it, or it has a name, or it's just kind of generic. So there's all this information that's coming in on what you get physically with these gifts. And I will show you some live examples in the next couple slides. And then we talk again about these hard credits and soft credits. We talk about a hard credit, meaning that when we say it like we're saying it, we mean that is the entity that deserves credit on in the eyes of the IRS for having made a charitable gift. And then the soft credit is kind of the inspiring organization or your donor who has asked that this gift be made to you. So when you're trying to look at the total giving of a donor in terms of the different ways that you segment and treat donors, your donor file in general, you really want to get that full picture of them. However, in terms of the credit for the IRS, that is that third party funding organization. So hard and soft credit, although within the realm of your database, you can do whatever you want. So we do have clients who will actually give a hard credit to the advisee of the gift and a soft credit to the issuing organization. But it all depends on how you're going to report up that data, because the key thing is that with this particular client, then they also have it made so that a hard credit to a donor that is a DAF does not get receipted. So that's the key thing. They aren't thanked for a tax deductible donation. And then we also will talk a little bit about IRA distributions, because they can look or be confused at times with donor advised fund gifts. But in that case, the donor is the individual or family is actually who gets the hard credit, and they can add that to their charitable deduction lists for the year. And then I just wanted to mention that there's plenty of other available information to capture that can come through on a DAF letter and or how you get that DAF letter. Could be came through on the phone, or could be through the mail, or could be directly from the issuing organizations, as we discussed. And then also people can make gifts in memorial or tribute using this channel. So let's just jump to some examples of different transactions, and I can share with you what we will see. So this one is from Schwab Charitable. I just want to mention that one of my generous clients has allowed us to share these for this part of the webinar in the live version. And we've already redacted all the key information. And then I also redacted a little bit with my little blue boxes there. So what you see is both the check and the letter. This is not proper size. The letter is kind of check width, and all of the handwriting are is what happens at our facility to give a heads up to the people who are actually in charge of getting this data entered. And that can happen one of two ways. Sometimes we do direct database data entry of these types of gifts. Sometimes it goes through the regular data upload that comes after a deposit's been made on behalf of a client. So I just wanted to mention that at the top, you see that this is somebody's fund. And then the language is we are pleased to present the league with the enclosed grant in the amount of made on behalf of your donor's name at Schwab Charitable. So it's very careful language, and then it will typically tell you the grant amount. It will say acknowledgement, and that there's some ability for the donor to say either their name, they want their name acknowledged because they feel that they have motivated this gift, so they want to get that acknowledgement from you. Sometimes it just matches what's in the top right corner, the fund name. There's an address, and actually, and George mentioned this yesterday, a fair amount would prefer to remain anonymous as well. So you need to have a
8 to
process.
14% of the DAF gifts that come in nationwide are anonymous, depending on the organization. You're not going to be able to match that back.
And then here's a grant designation line, and sometimes, and you'll see it sometimes references a campaign name, or that's where you might get your honor, memorial, tribute information. So it's really important, regardless of who captures the transaction for to reconcile with your deposit. It's really important for a couple sets of eyes to be looking at this, just to make sure everything's captured correctly for your organization's business rules. So if we go to transaction number 2, it's very similar. I think what I wanted to show here is that the acknowledgement line here isn't the name of the fund, it's the person's name. So typical business rules in this case would be if the name matches the fund and matches a record in the database, if we're doing live data entry, then it's okay to use the name one way or another, depending on business rules. But a lot of times clients don't want many assumptions to be made if it doesn't come with any sort of reply device. Like when we get a stack of these from Schwab, we often don't have any sort of reply device with them. So then if we go to the third transaction, this one, I had to look at this a little bit. So again, when the donor advised fund has been opened, that is when your donor gets the credit through the IRS for funding that account with their donation. And so I kind of looked a little and just saw that this collaboratory organization is actually, if you look on the bottom of the letter, it's part of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, doing business as collaboratory. So you likely have collaboratory as a marketing effort of the Southwest Florida Community Foundation, which enables that community foundation to effectively serve many more donors than just people who would have gone to them anyway to open up their own family foundation or have a private fund. And then you just see this one is designated to general operating support. There's no other identifying information for who may or may not have received any marketing about this gift. But you've got the charitable fund, but it's not that charitable fund that is to get the credit, because that charitable fund already got the credit when they gave to the collaboratory. So that's why these really need to have a lot of eyes on them, or ability to understand the different information, the different sets of information that's coming through on these. And then one last one is the difference here is that this is a gift from a charitable foundation that I looked up to see, was it a corporate charitable foundation? But this this foundation seems to have been a company that worked with donors around different types of planned giving investments or vehicles, and then either they had their charitable arm, or they started their charitable arm to be able to enable donor advised fund giving through under their wings. So it's become popular for donors, but it's also become popular for the hosting organizations, if you want to put it that way. And so if you're interested, there are definitely some ways where I can see this giving vehicle still change over the years. Right now, to me, it's a bit tricky, like the Facebooks of the world, or the different giving platforms that are just making it so easy for people to give. And what do you as the mission-based organization get from them? These you get a lot more than some of the kind of pure play tech intermediaries when it comes to ways to give. And then I was just going to show that this one, for purpose, they did say full match 4 times. So this was a gift definitely motivated by a marketing piece. The other way I think of DAF donors is almost like sustaining donors, where you want to keep marketing to them. Just because you're getting the sustaining gift, that doesn't mean that you're hands off for every other one. You may have a different cadence, because depending on their giving level, but really, I can't remember if I'm making this assumption from what you said, George, or I think in conversation with a few clients, once somebody gives by a DAF, it doesn't mean they're always giving by their DAF. Yeah. But they could also give a sustaining gift through their DAF. So it's really very flexible opportunity and conversation to have with your donors. So that's just kind of why there seems to be that next month hangover in terms of when you're actually realizing the donations from some of these gifts, because depending on how you're processing them, the volume you have, they really can be they really can take a lot of time that we're not used to having to spend just to get the money in the bank and the database updated. So if we move on then to special year-end considerations, I will say that there are more than one kind of year-end considerations, as you all know better than anybody. And at this point, I'm talking about calendar year-end considerations. And in our experience, there's really two different motivations. You're either an organization whose perhaps calendar year-end is not your fiscal year-end. So you're really trying to meet the donor where they are and acknowledge their special thoughtfulness, because they're coming to their, in essence, personal fiscal year-end as a donor. And so you're really wanting to meet the moment in how you process their gifts. And then there's other organizations where your fiscal may coincide with the calendar year-end. And so you're also, and maybe even more so, keeping an eye on your fundraising goals for the year and needing to know exactly kind of what is coming your way through the various giving vehicles that people give to you through. But because of some of the data considerations we were talking about, the timing for processing these gifts can take a little while longer, especially if you have a partner like the company here that will go into your database, look up, try and attribute to the soft credit to the actual donor you marketed to, or however you want to have that happen. That is quite a high touch task. And when volume picks up, there's this is not the kind of activity you want to rush through because, then you're not really able to be as thoughtful in how you proceed if and when mistakes are made. But what provides me a little bit of comfort, at least in terms of donor advised funds, is really the acknowledgement you're trying to send is for the thoughtfulness, not for the tax credit. So there is a little bit of there's a little bit of leeway there in terms of timing. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about that extra beat sometimes it takes to distinguish a donor advised fund gift from a gift from an IRA charitable fund. So actually, maybe if we could jump ahead a slide and then we'll go back. So what you'll notice is that a lot of the vendors who also will host donors retirement accounts or IRA accounts are the same cast of characters that will also have a charitable arm that will create donor advised funds. So many of our clients, we look for not only the vendor names and whether it has charitable at the end, like you see Charles Schwab there, but that's not Charles Schwab Charitable. You see Fidelity Brokerage Services LLC, not Fidelity Charitable Foundation or whatever theirs is called. So, we really do have to make those distinctions. And then some of the other kind of verbiage that really kind of gives us the sense that it's more of an IRA than the talk about reseeding and donor and distribution is a big one too. Redemption is another big one. So that's part of your considerations as you're trying to figure out how to capture your data, just to make sure that the gifts get in the right category. Because again, with these gifts, your donors are probably expecting an acknowledgement that functions as a tax receipt. So if we go back to the slide previous, that is the kind of the final thought, although I didn't mention identifying donor for attribution without a reply. So that is, we talked about that a little bit, like about in terms of business rules of where you want to, where and how you want to capture the intention of your individual donors, in that they have directed a donation to you at the year end or any other time. And I was thinking as you were talking, George, about the different kind of good times to kind of bump up the DAF friendly language. I had been thinking, geez, I think we should start moving into it the minute Giving Tuesday week is over. Because Giving Tuesday is now more of a week-long event as well. But I like the idea of what some people do with their socials is they'll create their own kind of special anniversary touch points to build campaigns around, and that makes an excellent time as well. Especially if it's something that is going to happen annually, because it's a good time to have people thinking about you. And so I just want to make the point about, I've been trying to separate the idea of acknowledgement versus reseeding. So any thank you to your actual donor who has funded a DAF account. Obviously they consider themselves donors of that gift, even though technically it came from that third-party organization. Much like we typically will shorthand and say, well, you're a lapsed donor, and your donor's like, I don't feel lapsed, I've been busy. So it's kind of the same thing where, certainly we want to show our appreciation for having your organization be top of mind, and acknowledge that you have received the fruits of their generosity, even if it came from this third party. But you have to be careful to leave any sort of tax language out of that particular communication. And I think, and actually some of the links George sent, I know Fidelity has recommended language for acknowledgements from DAFs and some clients that I've been poking around in what we do for them will use a similar, just a little disclaimer at the bottom that thank you for your generosity. If you're interested, your gift may be eligible for a tax deduction if you reach out to so-and-so. So it's really kind of just passing the buck, but it very clearly says we are not giving you a receipt for tax purposes. So that is what I wanted to talk about today. And I wanted to call out Kathy at League of Women Voters for helping me give these real world examples. And that is something that only you get for being here on this version. And especially through our technical troubles. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Any questions?
You do have questions. If you want to put them in the Q&A box, we can answer those. And again, to reiterate what Stephanie says, and what George is probably thinking, thank you for dealing with our technical difficulties today. Sometimes technology doesn't work the way we want it to, so I appreciate you all coming back on. And I am not Nick Ellinger, by the way. I am Joey. I don't know why it reverted, but it did. Zoom and I are in a complicated relationship.
Yeah, that's just perfect because this is a kind of a complicated topic, but I mean, I think a lot of people are saying 10%, easily 10% of their gifts are coming in through for donor advised funds these days. So that's something to start thinking about sooner rather than later. And they do have a big implication on your data transfer across partners. So it never hurts to get started.
We do have a few questions. I'll start with the first one. How do you deal with EFT DAFs?
So EFT, from my point of view, it's very interesting because I was talking to one of the widget platforms, one of the widget companies, because although they have it set up so that if you're making an EFT gift, they can handle it, but sometimes just depending on the size of the third party, they get checks and they're like, we didn't expect any checks. Like, what do we do with these? So basically that, because we also process credit cards, that's something that we can process in terms of the deposit, and then the data capture side of things is the same.
And this one asks, is there an example of an end of year opportunity or ask for gift from a DAF and an example of the acknowledgement letter? Is that something that we can send out?
Yeah, if Teresa wants to, Joey, if you want to collect the email address of Teresa, we can follow up with that. Not a problem.
Excellent. And then the next one, are you seeing organizations receive gifts from the institution's charitable funds themselves? Example, if no DAF successor is named upon someone's passing, the DAF rolls into Bank of America Charitable Fund, and then that fund directs gifts.
Stephanie and I were talking about this yesterday. So this wasn't I mean, I'm not sure of the audience here, but it wasn't a development, plan giving / major giving conversation this session. But what I will always tell organizations is, if you have a major gift officer, a plan giving officer, the moment you know someone has a DAF, depending on how much they're giving, I would make sure that that individual, if they can be screened for wealth, whatever happens, you want to look at identifying if that individual has a DAF, how you can be one of the beneficiaries of that DAF when that individual passes, because DAFs can either revert to family members, like direct line children, for them to use and to make donation through, or it can revert to the DAF organization itself, the successor, which in the case of the example here was Bank of America Charitable Fund, and then they will disperse it as they see fit. But for the individual can have control up until his or her passing. So if George Whalen donates to St. Jude's Children's and he has $100,000 in his DAF, and St. Jude's and one other organization ask, can we be the beneficiary? It's up to that individual to say, George, to say 50% can go to St. Jude's, 50% can go to, nonprofit B. And upon his passing, those funds get distributed based on his specific instructions to the charitable fund itself.
So that makes me think then, that if you, haven't already, perhaps an organization should look at what gets sent out when people request plan giving information. Just kind of don't forget your DAF and to make sure that you've designated a successor. But from my end, I believe organizations might get those gifts from the like the Bank of America Charitable Trust, but I don't think they would ever come to a PO box so that they would come to our facility. So good question. And it also kind of
Great
taps into I think one of the things that might be evolving about how DAFs are handled, in that there's really a lot of freedom for that money to just sit there.
Stephanie and George both have their emails listed on this last slide, and we will be sending out the deck as well as the recording shortly. So once again, thank you for joining us. Do you have
Thank
anything?
you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Everyone have a
you.
good day.
Have a
Thanks.
great day. Happy year end.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.